Good morning and you're very welcome back to the channel, everybody. So in this video today we are going to be taking a trip to what was Czechoslovakia, now obviously the Czech Republic and Slovakia, to have a chat about the history of the very famous and now somewhat iconic Zetor tractors that probably first appeared in Ireland around the 60s and 70s, and my god, what a history they have had. No tractor manufacturer has probably done more to get contractors and potato farmers off the ground when money was tight and costs were high. Back in the 70s and 80s, these fantastic tractors came on the market and they were affordable. A lot of people turned their noses at them, up at them, especially other tractor manufacturers who like to point out that, they were from a communist era, and that, maybe they were to be avoided and that they weren't the best manufactured. But they certainly, although they mightn't have been the most prettiest looking tractors at the time, they certainly were a serious workhorse of a machine, and they are loved all throughout Ireland. In my area alone at home, I don't think there was a road that somebody didn't have a Zetor tractor on. They were very popular with potato farmers, silage contractors. You had high horsepower for reasonably cheap money at the time. Dairy farmers, lots of dairy farmers had them, driving silage harvesters and stuff like that. They really were a very popular tractor in Ireland, and still are, and very much loved. So in this video, we're talking about Zetor. We're going to be dealing with the period up until around 1990, so the end of what was the first of that crystal range, that Zetor crystal range, until things changed a little bit for them. So good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome back to the channel, and a very happy St. Patrick's Day to you wherever you are in the world. I hope everybody's getting out and enjoying the festivities. It's not quite St. Patrick's Day with me here yet. I'm videoing this a little bit earlier, but I will be getting out to enjoy it if the weather stays anyway right. So last week in the video I asked who could guess what tractor brand I was going to be talking about this week, and the first man that got it right was Jared Hennessy. So Jared, well done. Good guess, well done, fair play to you. So if you want to drop me your email or your address or something in the comments, or give me an email, I'll send something out to you. I don't know what it is yet, but I'll get my hands on something and I will send it out to you. So looking at Zetor tractors, so when we look at Zetor, we have to go right back to the 1940s, so 1946. So Zetor, the company, was founded back in 1946 as the tractor company. So officially from 2007, it's now officially known as Zetor Tractors AS. So it's a Czech agricultural machinery manufacturer, founded in 1946. We said the company is based in Brno in the Czech Republic. Since June 1929-2002, the only shareholder has been a Slovak company, HTC Holdings. The company manufactures tractors, tractor components, such as engines and transmissions. So here we have another example again that I speak about on nearly every video, where you have post-war 1946, the war is over and countries trying to get back up on their feet again, and they want to do something with their factories. They want to get the country back up on its feet. They want to get industry moving and get men back to work. And the company that founded Zetor, where it originated, the factory, that factory had originally been making, obviously, military equipment and stuff, and they were making diesel aero engines. So they were making, I think it was a 9-cylinder radial piston diesel engine, as far as I'm aware, originally. So they have a huge history, obviously, in engineering and manufacturing. So the next progression was, obviously, like other manufacturers, into the farm machinery market when the war finished in 1945 into 46. So Zetor was the first manufacturer to develop actually a tractor safety cab. In its 78-year history, Zetor has sold nearly at this stage 1.5 million tractors. Currently, the Zetor portfolio includes, I think it's about 6 or 7 models, ranges up to from 40 up to, I think it's 171 horsepower for the current Crystal HD, as far as I'm aware. So abroad, Zetor is represented through 7 affiliations in North America, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Poland, Slovakia, and India. In 2015, 86% of the total production of the company was headed to foreign countries. In addition to traditional markets such as Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Germany, its products are also exported to the UK, to France, to Ireland, and to Lithuania. So the name Zetor, what is it? What does it mean? So the name Zetor, which was later to become the name of the brand, and which was used by the state company to mark the tractors, was created by Rostislav Sapak. So he was a member of the Czech Economic Department in the spring of 1986. So the name Zetor, if you take the word for farming, so the word for farming in Czech is Zemelecki, and then the their native name for tractor is tractor. So when you take Zemelecki and tractor and take the ZE and the Tor and you put them together, you get Zetor. So the history then, when we look at the history, so the history of Zetor started obviously in 1946, as we said, when the first tractor was produced by Zubrojov Bruno, branded the Zetor 25. So the Zetor trademark was registered in the same year, and mass production of Zetor tractors had began on the 7th of August in 1946. So by 1947, there was almost 3,500 had been produced. In 1948, the Zetor 15 was approved for production, so this was the smaller model of the original model, which was the 25, and it was manufactured until 1949. The Zetor 25A and the 25K were manufactured up until 1961, and 158,517 of these models were produced, of which 97,000 in total were exported. The Zetor 35 with a 42 horsepower four-cylinder engine was manufactured from 1945 to 1960, and then an upgraded Zetor version until 1968. So looking at these models then since 1946, when the first model came out, it was a two-cylinder, four-stroke diesel powered. That was the Model 25. So standard features on this surprisingly included 6 forward, 2 reverse speeds, independent braking and differential lock, which was rarely seen on any tractor at the time. When you think back to tractors that you'd be more familiar with maybe, that was out around that time. Differential locks, split brakes, and that were not standard on them. So between 1946 and 1961, as I said, Zetor made modifications to the Model 25 and also announced a more affordable tractor. That was the Model 15. The Model 15 had a 15 horsepower, one-cylinder diesel engine. Zetor also sold the Model 25A, which was a more modern version of the 25. It was more comfortable. And then it had the Model 25K, which was it was more suited to crop farmers. So it had a higher base on it, so it was more up off the ground for crops passing underneath and stuff. Much better ground clearance on it. So production of the 25A and the 25K tractors ceased in 1961, and as I said, 158,570 units were built of the Model 25. So moving on up then to what became known as the Super Series. So Zetor had announced their first four-cylinder, 42 horsepower tractor in 1955, which was named the Super 35. Later in 1960, the larger model, the Super 55, which had a power output of around 50 horsepower, was announced. Standard features, wait for it now. Now just remember, this is back in the mid-50s. Standard features on this were suspended front axle, a differential lock that it inherited from the Model 25. So it also had an air compressor built in for blowing up wheels and blowing dust out of the cab and stuff like that. And they also, they offered a cab which had optional heating and stuff in it as well. So they were coming equipped with extras. Well, they weren't extras; they were standard features that most tractor manufacturers did not have, even as an optional extra at the time. So Zetor, they also had a modified version of the Super Series. It was a tractor, which was called the Super P. So from 1955 to 1968, 106,811 of the Super Series tractors were made. So again, when you look at the Super P, obviously it was a track version. And this was something that they made in-house themselves. This was their own design. It was their own feature. It wasn't like other manufacturers that had gotten outside companies to come in and just bolt up a track system onto the tractors for them. This was their own design. It was all in-house. Being from a communist time and a communist era, there wouldn't have been dealing with too many outside companies for parts. Everything would have been had to have been built in on site, in-house. So moving up the years then, and coming to the tractors that kind of starting that we would be have been familiar with ourselves here in Ireland. And that was the unified range. So the UR1, that unified range 1. They call them the UR1s. So in 1958, Zetor introduced its first unified range. This meant that each tractor used common components, but ended up ranging in size, obviously, so power and features, things like that. Everything. A lot of the stuff came from the same parts bin, but the tractors were a little bit bigger or whatever. So over 1 million UR1 model tractors were ever produced. And that's kind of the same. They took the principle that a lot of manufacturers went down through the line later on, 10, 15, 20 years further down the line, when you looked at where you had obviously the 100 series and maybe the 30 series John Deere's. They all shared a lot of parts, but the tractors got bigger as they went up the range. So when you look, then you had the Zetor. The 3011 was the first tractor to be produced in the UR1 series, and the 3011 had a power rating of 37 horsepower at 2200 RPM. It had a modern direct injection diesel engine. Now, for 1958, again, this was way ahead of the time when you think that the first Perkins direct injection diesel engine wasn't until 1965. They really were ahead of the curve with their engineering and their technology. So yeah, it had a modern direct injection diesel engine, which was very advanced for the time. The tractor had 10 forward speeds and 2 reverse speeds, with 5 speeds between 2.5 and 7.5 mile an hour. So this would be the most common range for working in fields, obviously. So other models at the time included the 2011, so there was a smaller version, a little less horsepower of the 3011. So the 2011 was roughly 20 horsepower. The 3011 was roughly 30 horsepower. So the 11 then, it signified that it was a two-wheel drive, standard cabless two-wheel drive tractor. The special model then included the 3016 and the 4016. So these were half-track versions for use in snow and weak soil and stuff like that. The 3017 had a lower centre of gravity, and the 2023, it was a narrow, fully track version. Also, there was a 3045, which had four-wheel drive, so 30 horsepower, four-wheel drive. Although the front wheels were only for some reason driven when you're in the higher range. Finally, then there was the 2013 and the 3013, which meant that these were 20 and 30 horsepower cabless narrow tractors, two-wheel drive narrow tractors. So they were narrow orchard tractors. In 1916, then, a more robust, powerful model above the 4011 was produced. So it was the Zetor 5511, which was popular enough in Ireland. There was a good few of them around Ireland. There was, the 5511. So in 1968, then, from positive feedback from customers all across the world, the Zetor engineers decided to update all the Zero models to the 5 series. So a 3011 became a 3511. The bonnets in these machines, then these tractors, were a little bit more square instead of rounded, as on the earlier models, and the tractor looked more robust than its predecessors. So again, in 1978, the tractors were upgraded. A review of the UR1 models was carried out, and on the agenda was a more carrying capacity and traction. The engines were stronger, the tractor was heavier, and the front axle supported stronger hubs. The 5711 and the 6711 had an optional extra of a torque multiplier, which doubled the number of speeds. So if you applied the torque multiplier, you got something in the range of 23% increase in torque, and whilst your speed was decreased by 23%, obviously. So when this option was fitted, it basically meant that you had 20 forward and 4 reverse speeds, which was a lot for the time. Again, the 5711, the 6711, they are popular, very popular in Ireland. So moving on then, next in the range, and this is the range that everybody is in love with, throughout Ireland especially, if you're from the 70s and the 80s, and now they're a collector's item. They really are. So the unified range 2, so the UR range 2. So the demand for heavier duty tractors grew rapidly, obviously throughout the mid 60s and 70s, as we had seen before. The UR1 range of tractors range approximately from 25 to 60 horsepower, and they were lacking a little bit of robustness and power for arable farmers across Central Europe. So in 1968, the development of the UR2 series of tractors was completed. So the UR2 was better known as the famous Zetor Crystal range of tractors, and that was the first range of tractors ever to be produced with a flatbed cab and an integrated rollover protection system. Now, anybody that's familiar with Zetor, obviously you might have seen them, but if you haven't been into the cab of a Zetor tractor, I'll tell you, you're missing something, because you could probably fit the whole of the Irish rugby team into it, along with the Six Nations trophy as well. Congratulations, lads. Yeah, these were huge cabs. They had a seat out the back, at the back window that faces well. You could probably comfortably fit 4 or 5 people into it. A load of kids along, a father or whatever, along with a load of kids, was a common sight. And it was a comfortable place for a passenger to be. And I've driven plenty of Crystals down through my years, and I've been a passenger in Crystals as well. And when you compare it to other tractors at the time that I was a passenger in, nothing comes close to them. They were absolutely fantastic. The size of these cabs, a lovely big flat floor. So these days the manufacturers boast about having room to put your lunch bag, but you could put the kitchen into the cab of a Crystal. Fantastic machines, fantastic space. They probably were a little bit noisy, but the engines, the tractors themselves had a very distinctive sound. If you heard one coming up the road, you'd know straight away that it was a Crystal. Very, very distinctive sort of sound to them. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but you'd know them a mile away. Yeah, and as I said, for people who are looking for a bigger tractor, a little bit more horsepower, but didn't have huge amounts of money to spend, these were a fantastic option. So lads getting into contracting, especially into silage, and you wanted to drive a silage harvester at the time, these were the machine to go to if you wanted a little bit of power, a little bit of starter about them, because they were a big tractor as well. They were good and heavy and stable. These were a machine to go to potato farmers as well. They're very, very popular with potato farmers. So yeah, at the time, the Crystal was probably the most technological tractor around. What other manufacturers offered as optional extras or failed to offer at all, Zetor included on the Crystal range as standard equipment. So 10 years after the first UR2 tractor was produced, Zetor introduced turbos to the Crystal range. The four-cylinder engine, when fitted with a turbocharger, was rated at 100 horsepower. The six-cylinder version, in comparison, could be turbocharged up to 160 horsepower. So the Crystal series contained the following models. So you had the 8011, so that was the 80 horsepower one-wheel drive. 80 horsepower two-wheel drive. The 80 horsepower, so they had the 8045, then 80 horsepower four-wheel drive. The 111, the 145, the 12011, the 12045, and the 16045. But for some reason, and I don't know, I can't find out why, the 160/45 was detuned when it came to the UK at 140 horsepower. Now, my theory is that it would have probably, if it came in at 160 horsepower, at the money it was at into the UK at the time, I'd say there was probably a bit of lobbying done maybe to stop it from harming other UK-based tractor manufacturers' sales at the time. That's just my theory on it. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you have history of the Crystal 140/45 or 160/45 or whatever, just let me know what you thought of it in the comments. I'd love to hear from people on these machines. So yeah, the Crystal range then at that phase of its life, it sees production in 1989. So when you look at the Zetor company itself, throughout the mid 1980s and Eastern Europe in particular, you had the end of the Cold War and the fall of a lot of communism. There was a lot of political upheaval. There was a lot of change going on, especially in places like Czechoslovakia, the Czech Republic now, and Slovakia. So yeah, it was in the early 1980s that events started to take a downward turn for the Brno plant. So that was the original Zetor plant. The Cold War had ended, and a tank manufacturer in the town of Martin, which is in Slovakia. At the time, they would have been all the one country, so it would have been Czechoslovakia. So Martin is about 3 hours drive from Brno, the original plant. So they were insisting that crystal production was moved to its factory as military orders had started to dry up. So they needed to keep these men in this factory working. So they wanted to move crystal production across to this other plant. So having sold 44,000 crystals, Brno was forced to transfer manufacture to ZTS in Slovakia, where they would be built by a workforce with no experience in tractor production whatsoever. The relationship between the two was hardly cordial, and build quality suffered as a result, yet Martin went on to make bigger models of their own design. Although the tractor carried the Zetor name, the Brno engineers left the ZTS factory to its own devices and concentrated instead on developing the sub 100 horsepower range. So these include the ongoing development for the UR1 series for developing countries, and then the Frontiera series, which filled the hole left by the Crystal. So as regards Zetor in Ireland, so the first Zetors, from what I can understand, were brought to Ireland by Tim O'Shea from County Cork. Now, he had went to Slovakia to, I think, was to try and get an agency for Skoda cars, and ended up coming back with Zetor. So the models that he would have started off with were the 25A and the 25K. And O'Shea had founded the O'Shea Group company, which established Zetor as one of the top marques from sometime between the 1960s. Zetor were also distributed by Buckley's from Condra for some time. O'Shea closed business in the 1980s, and the Czechs opened up their own business in Ireland. So they were importing and distributing tractors themselves. I know at home in County Meath, where I'm from, around Navan, as far as I remember, and now I could be mistaken, but I think Smiths and Navan at the time, they were definitely Ursus dealers, and I think they were Zetor dealers as well. And speaking of Ursus, they were the same tractor at the time, but the Ursus company were from Poland, so they were building Zetor style tractors in the Ursus factory. Now Ursus have a huge, I'm starting to look into Ursus at the minute. The history of Ursus goes back to the 1800s, and that is a story to be told. That's going to be a 2 or 3 part video. Incredible history of the Ursus machinery. I will be covering them in the coming weeks or coming months. So yeah, look, it was really the Crystal that really scored success in Ireland, with an untold number arriving in the country throughout its production run from 1969 until the early 90s. It formed the basis for many contracting fleets, as owners were often able to afford a new Crystal rather than use a second-hand Ford or Massey Ferguson or a John Deere with similar power. Also, the Crystal's favour was its safety cab and that built-in passenger seat, 2-speed PTO, air compressor. They were all standards. The front suspension was also a novelty, but rarely enjoyed rave reviews. But look, that was it. That was Zetor tractors, and I'm sure everybody watching this video, especially if you're from Ireland, the UK, I do not know. I'm not sure how popular they were across the States and maybe down into Australia, and that I'm not sure about their export market. But certainly Eastern Europe, Ireland and the UK, they were in the 70s and 80s, were a very, very popular machine. And they still are. There's still a lot of them out there today. And I will be picking up this in the second parter. But I think when you think of Zetor, it ends with the old Crystal, and then it moved into a new phase from Frontiera model onwards. And I will be talking about them in another video. I'll do another video to finish off Zetor up to where it is today in a couple of months, maybe in about a month or 6 weeks' time. But that is it. If you have any history with Zetor, please give us a shout, give us a comment. And if you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe and give us a thumbs up or a like or a share or something, just to help the channel along a bit. Because we are putting a lot of effort into getting all this information together and trying to get it out to you every Sunday morning. But yeah, fantastic tractor. That's it. That's all I have to say. If you are an owner, if you have one, or if you had one, or you drove one, or you crashed one, or blew one up, or whatever, just drop us a comment and let us know what you think of them. Personally, I think they were a very, very underrated machine for what they were. They were very, very underrated. Um, I know, yeah, as I said, a lot of Massey men and John Deere men and whatnot turned their noses up at them and made fun of them, but they were a fantastic tractor, very, very reliable, very strong, and very, very capable and comfortable machines that were ahead of their time as far as technology went. Um, so that's it. That's it. Hope you enjoyed the video. I will be back next week with I don't know what, but I have a plan in my head. Right. Okay. Enjoy your St. Patrick's weekend, and I'll see you all next weekend. Thanks, guys.